In 7 days, 5 of them spoke, and each said something different from the others on the exact same topic. None of the 5 is a journalist or blogger. The first is the head of a Vatican department. The second is the Pope, with a letter. The third is the president of the bishops of an entire continent. The fourth is the legal office of one of Europe's most important archdioceses. And the fifth is a cardinal who used a word the other 4 were careful not to pronounce. That word is persecution, and the phrase that accompanies it asks the faithful something that no one else that week dared ask. Cardinal Raymond Burke made this pronouncement in a video message recorded on August 6th at the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and released a few days later. He explicitly addresses those discouraged by the ongoing persecution of the traditional Mass. He doesn't mince his words and doesn't attribute that persecution to anyone in particular. Then comes the request. It's up to us now, even at the cost of suffering, to fight to make it as widely available as possible to all the faithful who desire it. 9 days later, he returned to the subject in an interview with American commentator Michael Knowles and added the phrase that has caused the most discussion, that liturgy has never been suppressed and never could be. What did he say exactly? The first statement is brief, almost private in tone, and is addressed to readers of an American priest's blog. It is not a document and has no legal value. It is an encouragement. The Mass in the Roman Rite, he says, is a tremendous asset in the Church, and that asset will never be lost. The rest of the sentence is an invitation to fight, even at the cost of suffering. The second intervention is longer and more detailed and begins with an observation. In churches where the ancient rite is celebrated, he argues, one sees a different audience than the average. Young people, young married couples, and families with many children. The young people who return to the practice, he adds, want the traditional liturgy. He leaves no room for ambiguity regarding the validity of the modern rite. The Novus Ordo is valid, and there is no dispute about that. His thesis is different, namely that the ancient rite communicates divine action more fully and richly. Persecution by whom? The cardinal doesn't name names, but the week he speaks, he names them for him, and it's best to list them in the order they arrived. On July 29th, Cardinal Arthur Roche, prefect of the dicastery responsible for liturgy, gave an interview to a British Catholic weekly. When asked about the future of restrictions, he gave a no-holds-barred answer. It's a very complex area, and it's a very important area because the Eucharist is the sacrament of unity. But no, Pope Leo will not change Traditionis Custodes, and he will not return to Summorum Pontificum. On August 14th, the Vatican Bulletin published a letter from Leo to Roche himself, dated June 29th, regarding a conference on liturgical formation in Oregon. The text is brief and never explicitly mentions the ancient rite. However, he demands respect for the rites promulgated by St. Paul VI and St. John Paul II, and insists on fidelity to the approved texts and instructions. He cites several times a document from the previous pontificate on liturgical reform. The next day, it's Munich's turn. The Archdiocesan Canon Law Office responds in writing to those who requested a return to the previous norms, and the response is both courteous and definitive. And the bishops, what do they say? Monaco's response is worth reading in its entirety because it begins with an acknowledgement and ends with a rejection. The official begins by stating that the ancient Mass has unquestionably shaped the faith life of countless believers for centuries and has produced saints. He adds that the 2021 law contains no judgment that the old form is harmful. Then comes the crucial passage. The old rules have been entirely replaced. The priest's right to celebrate without permission no longer exists, and a return is not within the Archbishop's jurisdiction. In the United States, however, the picture is different. As the president of the Episcopal Conference says, Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma City speaks on television on August 13th. For faithful attached to the ancient rite, he admits, it's a dilemma. Then he adds the phrase that has been repeated everywhere. I'm not sure we've heard the last word of this pontificate on Traditionis Custodes. He recommends the parish of the Fraternity of St. Peter, which is in full communion with Rome, to his faithful. He also points out that a diocese in Texas has loosened some restrictions in those very days. Even earlier, on July 10th, Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone had posed the issue in practical terms. If the restrictions are not lifted, some faithful will go to these other groups that are not in full communion with the See of Rome. But how many of these faithful are there really? Here the numbers cool the picture considerably, and they need to be mentioned because they are the part that neither side likes to quote in full. According to a Pew Research Center survey from 2025, only 2% of American Catholics say they attend the Old Mass weekly. That's about 1 million people in a huge country. Two sociologists who have written a book on the subject, Cranny and Bullivant, estimate that the actual attendance on a typical Sunday in the United States is between 100 and 110,000, much less than 1 million. The same studies point out something else that is continually lost in the debate. A large portion of the faithful of the ancient rite do not identify at all with the Society of St. Pius X and recognize the authority of the Pope. On the other hand, there's a trend in the opposite direction, and it's European. The Chartres pilgrimage has grown from around 12,000 participants in 2022 to around 20,000 this year, the vast majority of whom are young people. And the association that organizes it has been called upon to mobilize volunteers for the Pope's visit to France, a movement that is difficult to dismiss as marginal in Paris and Rome. And whose side is the Pope on in all this? The traces are there, but they do not form a clear line. And this is perhaps the most interesting point of the whole story. In March of this year, Leo wrote to the French bishops through Cardinal Burke, asking for concrete solutions for the generous inclusion of Catholics sincerely attached to the ancient rite. In that text, there is one sentence that weighs more heavily than the others. It is worrying that a painful wound continues to open in the Church regarding the celebration of the Mass, the very sacrament of unity. Last October, he granted Burke permission to celebrate Mass in the ancient rite inside St. Peter's Basilica, a permission he could easily have refused. But in an interview given last year to an American journalist, he also said something else, that for some, the liturgy has become a political tool, and that polarization has reached the point that people are not willing to listen to each other. In the end, the only practical advice he gives all week is the Cardinal himself, and it's surprisingly simple. He doesn't call for demonstrations, he doesn't call for petitions, he doesn't call for disruptions. He asks the faithful to make their wishes known to their bishops and above all to the Holy Father, while making one thing clear, that they are not questioning the validity of the council. And he recalls the case of a bishop who felt no attraction to that rite, yet described the faithful who attended it as some of our most devout Catholics. The bishop's only question was, why should I deny them? What do you think? If you liked the video, comment, Amen. God bless you.